Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Tips and Technologies for Return to the Office webinar. We're glad you could join us. I'm Mark Willison from our One Workplace Technology Division and today's moderator. To set the context for our conversation today, let's all agree that technology transforms the way we work. And while we see things changing on a weekly basis with mandates and mask mandates again, and what we're doing going back to the office and back from home, statistics show that many of us can't wait to get back to the office for some portion of our work week. But let's level set. Daniel Pinot, JP Morgan COO, said, quote, going back to the office with 100% of the people, 100% of the time, I think there's zero chance of it, end quote. And we agree. So we've asked some workplace real estate and technology experts to talk with us about their observations, experiences, and recommendations for getting people back to the office safely while promoting employee engagement and productivity. If you have questions today, please enter them in the chat function and we'll get to as many of them as we can. And now, to get the conversation started, I'm going to ask each of our participants, our panelists, excuse me, to take a minute to introduce themselves and explain their interest in this great, important topic. And we'll start with Wade McIntyre. Wade, good morning.
Good morning. Well, thank you for inviting us here. Yeah, I'm Director of Real Estate and Procurement for Moss Adams. We're about the 11th largest accounting and consulting firm in the nation. We're the largest that's headquartered in the West. National office is in Seattle, where the firm was founded about 108 years ago. So we've been around a while. 3,400 partners and employees who are based in one of our 32 offices. Most of those are up and down the West Coast, but we do have a number of them across the Southwest, as far east as Kansas City. And then from a real estate perspective, our portfolio totals about 700,000 square feet. My interest in this is that I've been driving a workplace initiative strategy at Moss Adams for the last 7 years, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that.
That's awesome. Thank you. Michael Alcantara, welcome. Please tell us about yourself.
Thanks, Mark, for having me. Hey, everyone. Michael Alcantara, IT Director of Video Collaborations for Palo Alto Networks. Palo Alto is known as the premier cybersecurity partner of choice for both enterprise and small SMB. We've been a disruptor for this industry for quite some time, and now coming into the forefront. Let's just say, given the threat landscape today, business has been quite brisk. My responsibilities revolve around video collaboration per the title. So anything associated with AV, audiovisual deployments, build outs, architecture, operations support associated with all of that from top to bottom, and as well as the procurement side of the equation. We're about 10,000 employees global with north of 1 million square feet in headquarters here in Santa Clara. Our footprint's typically 70% North America and about a 15-15 split between our APAC and EMEA regions.
Been a busy year then, I should say.
Indeed, and ongoing. So as you can see by the current news. A little background on myself. Prior to Palo Alto, I was at NetApp for a near decade, having the same amount of fun. So it's north of 20 plus years in the industry.
I'm glad you're here. Thank you, Michael. Last but by no means least, Leon Papkoff, welcome. Leon, please tell us about yourself.
Hi, thanks for having me today. So yeah, my name's Leon Papkoff. I'm the SVP of Smart Campus for a company called the CXApp, which has a smart campus application. We recently were purchased by a company called Inpixion. So that's our company today. To kind of give everyone an idea, we focus on 4 key markets in the industry. So technology space, we have a number of customers in the technology space, medical and pharma as well. We also are working with a number of entertainment brands as well as gaming and also the financial and banking industry. So those are kind of our key market segments. The core target that we do a lot of best practice sharing with and a lot of customers that we talk directly to are going to be around either IT, workplace, or real estate. So any individual that has that title, those are usually our direct customers that we talk directly with. So happy to be here today. Looking forward to the conversation.
And we have panelists that meet those criteria too, as well as our participants obviously listening. So looking very forward to the next hour, gentlemen. Thank you. let's get started, because I think we can spend more than an hour on this topic, and I think everyone would agree. So we'll start off with Wade. Wade, what challenges does your current workplace strategy present? How has or will the workplace design, location, or the scale of it all, will that change or has it changed?
So if it's okay, Mark, I'm going to actually answer those questions in reverse order. So will our workplace design or strategy change? And the answer to that is really no. And I got to give you some context so you'll understand that. So for the last 7 years, as I indicated a couple minutes ago in our introduction, Moss Adams has really been in the process of implementing a whole new workplace strategy that's really taken us from a very traditional office design with one-to-one assigned seating, a lot of private offices, high-walled cubes, to a model that really incorporates an open concept with no assigned seating. I mean, even for our most senior people, and certainly no private offices. We do have a large ratio of technology-rich rooms for collaboration and individual focused work, but none of them are really permanently assigned. And the reason for this is that the reason we embarked on this journey is that our company's made up of tax practitioners, auditors, and consultants, which means that most of them are out of the office at clients a fair amount of the time. So it just doesn't make economic sense to tie up expensive real estate as if everybody's going to be in a seat every day. So as we renovate offices, when our leases come due for renewal, we plan that at capacity, everyone, including our support people, will be working remotely 2 to 3 days a week, either at a client site or home. So as you can imagine, we've had to invest heavily, and it's been a key part of our initiative in technology to support that physical model. So for us, COVID has merely affirmed that we were on the right track for the last 7 years because we didn't miss a step when it comes to productivity. You ask about challenge. So I think for us right now, the challenge is disparity. Because of our 32 offices, we've renovated about half, meaning that the other half are still living with the old traditional model. So if a bright, flexible, technology-rich environment is part of our plan to attract people back to the office, and it is, so how do you address the inequities across the portfolio in the short run? And there's no really quick, easy answer to that. I would say that a couple of steps we're taking. First off, we're having a standard approach to security and safety across the firm. That goes without saying. But we're also moving our unrenovated offices to seat sharing, even though their traditional design doesn't really accommodate flexibilities easily. We're equipping all of their workstations with the firm's standard desktop technology package rather than wait for the time that we renovate them. We're also utilizing change management, which is a normal part of our renovation process, so that we can help them adjust. We're investing in technology upgrades in some of their collaboration rooms, just not all. And then lastly, we're communicating what our plans are for them in the future, which is to continue implementing our strategy as their leases come up. So in short, what we're trying to do is minimize the have-not mentality until we have a chance to fully implement our workplace strategy over the next several years.
Nice. Yeah. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for that. Michael, how have the technology offerings for Palo Alto Networks employees, how has that changed over those past 18 months? High value, new technologies in place? What types of, what are you experiencing there?
All of the above, honestly. I think the approach that the leadership here had taken was to see how we can enable our remote workforce for what we saw as to be a prolonged environment. That was a year ago, and here we are, still current state. Now we're actually looking at the value propositions of the spend being predominantly on the remote workforce versus the on-prem environment. So this is still subject for us to decipher, and what our leadership has done early on was create this flex work coalition, as we call it. There's no playbook for pandemic and then now to the hybrid approach that we're looking at. But we have made it very clear for our workforce that this is employee choice to work remotely, and where we can open up, including the 3 regions where we have footprint, you are able to work within the context of the local jurisdiction. So here I am today working from the office, but that is my choice. But the focus right now is the timing of this. We are making strides to, again, look at the big picture. How are we going to approach the buildings themselves as far as a real estate restack that caters to potentially a hot desking or hoteling environment? The other questions for us is how do we improve the collaboration within those designs that we're now exploring with a lot of our partners, including One Workplace. And as of right now, it's sort of a hurry up and wait situation because of the Delta variant and the fact that this is still fluid. But that being said, we're not slowing down our efforts. Technology, in fact, is taking a front and center stage because we're relying so heavily in these technologies to allow for the hybrid approach. And now the key buzz is digital equity and how do we build towards that? So again, I think there's a lot of comparable enterprises out there that are asking the same questions based on the feedback and some of the meetings that we've held with this Flex Work Coalition, some of which partners of ours like Zoom, Workday, Splunk, and others, their leadership are looking to each other to help define that in all fronts.
When did that coalition start?
Started early on, and this was the brainchild of our CEO and head of people, Nikesh Arora, our CEO, and Leanne Hornsey, our chief people officer. And they reached out directly to the C-levels of all of these partners that we had. And because for that same reason, we had no playbook, but we know quite a few folks out there. Uber is one of them. Some of our key strategic partners, we asked them specifically, how are you approaching this? How are you defining a return to office strategy? And what are you looking at in terms of your real estate footprint? How are you employing technology? And not everyone has the same answer as anticipated. There is this, it's yet to really coalesce because you see some of the bigger partners out there initially mandating a return to work approach, and then some like us who have taken a more cautious or I would say a strategic approach in the sense that let's see what the bigger companies do, because this can potentially be a retention issue for them, and it might be an opportunity for us to seize the moment. So it's very fluid, absolutely, as you can see by some of the backtracking that we've seen some of the bigger companies do. Right.
I know you're in the office today. You may, there's masks in soon. We've got to wear masks in the office, right? And when we're in our own office, we don't. But the mandates are back, and Delta, and then there's Lambda coming on as well. So you mentioned digital equity. I know we're going to spend some time on that later in the hour, and the flex space and hearing about employee choice. But you also talked about in the coalition there, there's data to be gathered so that you can make your plans and make your next steps. And it's a great opportunity to bring Leon in. And Leon, are you seeing companies collecting metrics and actionable intelligence to inform the success of that return to the office strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when I look at how COVID's kind of impact companies, it's happened in different stages as many companies are, trying to figure out how to bring employees back into this space. The first kind of stage of it was, gosh, how do we get internet to actually work really well? How do we get people on Zoom? How do we get people to be able to work collaboratively and virtually, right? That was kind of stage one. Stage two is, what is our plan to bring employees back in? That date and that time frame kind of keeps moving and adjusting, but how do we bring employees back in? And almost every company in the world right now is looking at a more flexible work environment. So a lot of organizations are moving away from assigned desks and cubicles directly into more of a virtual booking of desks and cubicles. And that, I would say, every company in the world that we've talked to is trying to figure that out. So there's lots of best practices around that, pivots. Part of our platform, we do that for companies. But even those pivots and adjustments that we've seen companies make are adjusting to that. The next stage now that we're seeing is, okay, that's all happening. We have software in place to actually do that. what is the data that we're trying to capture around that? And they're trying to understand that data directly to your point and your question. And I think a lot of the data really now is focused around how much of the space is being utilized. So every organization out there is dealing with COVID differently, depending on where they have a location. If they have an office location in Silicon Valley, California, where Michael and I are located, or if they have a location in New York, or they have a location in Hong Kong, or they have a location in Tokyo, or wherever their locations are, those numbers are different. You need to be able to change capacity at a blink of an eye through software very quickly. And that capacity has to adjust so that it's flexible. Tomorrow, you could get a call from management where you have to increase capacity only in one location. So having those types of adjustments. Secondly, because we're moving more to a flexible environment and we don't have cubicles just sitting around for employees to come in, the situation now is turned is how much space do we actually need now? So space utilization within capacity is critically important too. So part of what we're actually rolling out is an amazing workplace analytics dashboard that will measure that in real time. It's even going to do predictive analytics in the sense that, hey, if I'm a fast growing company and I'm hiring 1,000 employees in the next 2 months, where do I put them and where do I position them? Where do I have the space? And if I consolidate these 2 buildings into one building, because I want to actually consolidate real estate now because everyone's not coming in all the time and every day now, I can actually save a lot of money in consolidation of real estate. So those types of metrics are critically important as well as what are the days that people are coming in? And are people coming in on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday equally? Or are they coming in more often on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday? You know what I mean? And as well as how does weather affect when they're coming in? And believe it or not, weather does affect it. On a rainy Friday, people aren't coming in as often as a sunny Friday. So things like that are all going around into analytics. That's going to be critically important. And believe me, it's going to save people money because you're going to be able to consolidate real estate. Real estate's one of the biggest, most expensive parts of any organization.
Wade, I see you nodding in agreement, and I hope it's not because we're feeling picked on being up in Seattle where it's rainy all the time.
No. I just for fun though, I would like to Leon's spot on in what he just said about that, and Michael as well, and that is the restacking. Because part of our initiative, as I said, for the last 7 years has been this open environment, but it also, because we are seat sharing and people are coming in only 2 or 3 days a week, we've been able to shrink our footprint so far, just going through half the portfolio by about 77,000 square feet. So that's like 1/10 of the current portfolio. But the real thing is what's that saved us? Because we can project out what that saved us in future occupancy costs. And thus far, it's saving us in future total occupancy costs $52 million. So that's a lot of money. Those guys are spot on in what they're saying with that.
And that dialogue, Wade, that's coming with your executive team, your real estate planning team, looking at future years and square footage to be utilized and planning those.
Absolutely. We go through a very specific process. We've got it pretty well dialed in. I mean, you know, it's not perfect, but we work with leadership when a lease comes up and we're looking at in a location that we're gonna renovate. Okay, we talk about we get very granular about how that's currently staffed, who they are, what level they are, and then what are the growth going to be. And then we apply our sharing ratios. We know what our model's supposed to look like, and it basically informs us what square footage do we need for that location. And in all cases, we've been able to shrink it, even though the population is growing. Sure. So it saves a lot of money up front, or in the long run, I should say.
Well, Leon, what are we talking about tool-wise? Sensors, software, AI, all of the above?
Yeah. So our analytics dashboard is going to utilize multiple touch points for data and information. So the key ones are going to be Wi-Fi. So we work directly with all the key Wi-Fi providers out there, from Cisco to Aruba to Juniper Mist. And so we integrate directly there. The mobile app itself, which is the core campus app. And then the other big one is IoT platforms, which we're doing a lot of integrations with some of the largest IoT platforms, and then those IoT platforms connect with sensors in the space. And we work with about 10 different sensor companies that are out there as well. And the sensors are going to gather information like occupancy or most commonly used areas of a floor, and where are areas more dense than others at different parts of the day. So as you can imagine, some of this is common sense, like elevators. If you have a building that's got an elevator, those areas are going to be busier in the morning when people are coming in, lunchtime when they're going out to lunch, and at the end of the day. So that's all kind of common sense. But where are the dense areas of the other parts of the floor? When is the break room busy? What conference rooms are more busy than others? Which desks are being used more often than others? What floors in your building are more popular than others? This is all very critical information to make the best decisions.
And the person that's managing this on the back end, they might have to be working from home also, right?
Exactly. Well, it's someone like take a look at like Wade, right? If Wade's got multiple offices around the world, if he's got an office overseas, how does he make decisions? He has to rely on people that are in the space. And most of the time, the people that are physically in the space without this software, they're kind of guessing. They're guessing on what they're seeing. But if you have software that tells you this information, Wade can just open up the dashboard, filter to that location, filter to the data he's looking for, and he can make his decision. He can even compare it from one location to another location. And that's what's going to give him the real-time information that he needs to make a really important decision that could eventually save his company millions of dollars.
Leon, you're speaking to my heart here.
Real good. Hey, some questions are coming in, folks. We will get to them at the latter part of the session, and please keep them coming because love to see that. So we want to be engaged with everyone. Michael, this is kind of alluding to some, and you mentioned it earlier, about that employee retention, right? How does this play into that? How is employee retention being challenged by all this? How do you build that value prop and getting people wanting to come to the office, say 1, 2, 3 times a week?
Yeah, and this is probably the biggest problem to resolve for any company, particularly in the growth environment. How do you incentivize? And right now, I think key challenges here would be, given the fluidity of the situation, there's no easy way to continue incentivizing when you're being told wear masks or we should not allow people to eat food inside the offices. And again, a lot of this comes down to metrics. A lot of this comes down to what Leon touched on. How do we see offices globally? How do when the rules change and allows for our crowds to come back, and what are the limits within the confines of safety? And without that ability to really see the data, you're flying blind. And I think there's, it's interesting to point out when the pandemic started, the first buzz was contact tracing. How do we ensure that we can tell everyone if they were exposed inside our office because of the ability to pinpoint, that we can quarantine accordingly and do our part in sanitizing the spaces so that we can prep it for business again in that situation. And then all of a sudden we see this shift, literally how fast the technology pivots, because, well, vaccination and inoculation is catching up. We really are no longer focused on internal contact tracing and not have to deal with the privacy issues. Let's focus on what's the inevitable, which is hybrid workforce and enabling a restack based on hoteling and hot desking, and what these footprints are going to look like that is conducive to a hybrid workforce and improving on the collaboration as we know it today. So incentivizing that is still a work in progress for a lot of us. I mean, it's a hard pitch. And I think for us in particular, we used the flex work approach, which is leave it to the employees first, gather 6 months worth of data, both on the sensor side, internal for us, and on the actual workflow with our remotes. And so far, so good. The business has been striving.
I like what you said earlier in an earlier remark was there was no playbook for this, right? And listening to you start talking about the beginning of it, I can think back to, oh yeah, it's hand sanitizer everywhere and temperature sensors, right? And we'll put them at every door and every other desk and every public space. And it's evolved, and there is no playbook for it. And there's some wait and see in all of this, safe to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, again, speaking on behalf of our approach, it is sort of a wait and see, but we also have a lot of research going on. Technology-wise, we're working with our OEM partners on how to approach improving the user experience, whether you're at home or in the office. And then on the real estate side, our partnerships with our real estate team. What is this, for lack of a better term, future hybrid office workspace going to look like? And how is it going to benefit, the employee who may remain flexible in the sense that I chose to work from home for these reasons? And can we incorporate technology to allow for them to really see when the best time for them to come into the office, because their colleagues are going to be in the office.
Right. Prior to Delta, were folks coming back in, and employees, there's energy to the getting back into the office?
We did. In fact, we got up to, at least for headquarters, we held 2 events here that were at the thresholds for what Santa Clara would have deemed,
Right.
at the limits. We were outdoors and people were coming back in. And then, of course, the mask mandates came back for Delta. But, that said, an interesting thought. We had construction projects that came about during COVID, and those are still underway, in flight. We're building an office in Bangalore. We are expanding in Tel Aviv. We are anticipating that our real estate footprint will, for the long term, will always play a role because of our hyper growth environment, so to speak. We have 1,000 employees as of when we went to pandemic that have never set foot in HQ, that have been hired and have no idea what HQ looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That geo differential, we've all talked about it, right? If you have enterprise and locations around the world, not just regional, not just country, it's different in every spot, right? Here in Seattle, Wade, we went back to mask mandates last Monday. So we're back to that probably a couple of weeks after what happened in California. Wade, curious, prior to Delta, was activity coming back? I know traffic picked up.
Yeah, definitely was. We were sort of hitting it, depending, which office and which part of the country. I mean, the percentages, we were starting to get up around 50%, right around in there. And now it's kind of backing off. People, don't want to wear masks, and I get that.
Yeah.
So, but we had seen an increase in activity for sure. Yeah.
Leon, what are companies telling you about you're talking to customers day in and day out? What are companies telling you about that remote hybrid and hybrid work, and how it's changing the way the employers and the employees communicate and collaborate?
Yeah, there's a couple points to hit on it. We definitely saw a lot of organizations start to have employees come back before Delta really kind of impacted us again. And people were really, really excited, and, morale was high, and a lot of people were really looking forward to it. And Delta comes in and restrictions come back into place. And then some companies that didn't fully opened up, ended up pushing their opening out a little bit further, a few months out. And so we definitely saw that impact happening as well. I think overall company morale and keeping employees engaged is a really critical step. I think, one of the things that Michael mentioned that we're definitely seeing a trend of is a lot of employees were hired during COVID, and they've never stepped foot on a campus for that organization. Some of them are really significant. Some of our growth customers have more employees that were hired during COVID than actually existed in the company pre-COVID. And a lot of organizations have large percentages, like 30% new employees were hired during that time frame. So this is going to be a challenge overall. One of the things we do in our application is we have location services in there. So you arrive on campus for the first time, you booked a desk, it will navigate you to the desk. And that makes it really easy for employees that have never stepped foot on a campus before. And a lot of our clients have given us amazing feedback. Another thing we've done for one of our customers, to just tie into your question, is we've built a work from home campus. And that sounds a little interesting because a lot of people go, well, why isn't a campus physically on the campus? We wanted to build a work from home campus with one of our key customers because we wanted employees to feel engaged as part of that overall experience. And so this is where they're doing things where there's more engagement that's happening with employees. They can see more information. There's more information related to like food recipes, wellness, ergonomic tips, how to set up my desk environment at home where I have the camera set up properly, things like that that are helpful hints. And the whole organization publishes additional content through our application, and it goes out to people if they're working from home, if they're in transit, or they're actually on the campus. And so one of the key things that we try to do is don't make an employee ever feel like they're on an island. Make them feel like they're part of this and continue that collaboration, because the experience is everything. It really ties people together.
How drastic of a pivot was that to hear them say, we want to make a virtual campus, an at-home campus? That's incredible. Now we got HR in the conversation and employee onboarding, and it feeds into the retention process. We know that the better the onboarding, the better the retention.
It was a very welcomed experience for people. Like, it was not, the interesting thing is COVID made it a drastic pivot. And it wasn't us and it wasn't the company, right? The company didn't do it. Right. It was COVID that did it. And so everyone had to react in real time. Some companies were prepared for it. People that started early, you know, I know Wade started this process years ago. Palo Alto's always been technology savvy and always been ahead of most companies already. So some companies were very much prepared for this. Other companies weren't prepared at all. And so adding this type of thing in really brings employees together easier, more natural, and it's more organic for them to do when they want to do it. And it's not forced either.
Company culture, right? I mean, did we think that was going to come into play, right? I mean, it's interesting. I know you have a story, if you wouldn't mind sharing it, for those younger folks getting into the workplace and that experience, if you would share that tale.
Oh, about the food recipes?
Yes.
Yeah, this is an interest. So a few of this is a little pocket in Silicon Valley, but a lot of young talent, especially engineers that get hired directly out of college, are used to never cooking. They don't know how to cook. They've been at a university where they live in a dorm and they get food, breakfast, lunch, dinner. So a number of corporate campuses here in Silicon Valley, they do the same thing in their cafeterias. They serve breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and they have coffee cafes and a lot of amazing amenities for employees. And so a number of employees in Silicon Valley, when COVID hit and they're stuck at home, they don't know how to cook. They don't, you know, they're going to heat up Hot Pockets and microwave pizzas and things like that. But beyond that, they don't know how to cook. So one of the things our client did in this work from home is they started publishing all types of recipes. You know, chicken recipes, vegetarian, vegan recipes, all these amazing recipes. They even had employees video shoot them cooking on camera, and they would publish those in the work from home. But talk about bringing employees together and building a common thread that wants to bring them together and learn from each other. You can't really think of a better process around that. It's a pretty amazing thing.
I call it a digital water cooler.
Good idea.
Yeah.
It's funny.
That's incredible. It really is.
We set up our kitchen because we pivoted our chefs to do live shows for the food business for that reason too, Leon.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
It was a live cooking show, just like you would see on Food Network.
Yeah. Is that right? And did you use Teams? You use Zoom to just do it in a Zoom room and put a USB camera and a microphone and off you go to the kitchen?
Blast the company through Slack. There's the Zoom webinar link, and there's our head chef cooking and hitting which camera he wants. It's on the pot, it's on the plate, all the ingredients, literally Food Network.
It's amazing. Like these are some of the silver linings we've been able to pull out of COVID, because things like this, I think, are going to outlast COVID. I mean, these are amazing things to bring to employees and to bring people together. But morale. When people are in a more flexible environment, why wouldn't you go into your corporate campus app and look up a food recipe from the head chef to Palo Alto Networks and go, that was amazing when we cooked that last month. Let's do it again, you know, and they're finding amazing recipes like that. I mean,
Michael, what was the viewership? What were the ratings? Did you know how many folks attended some of those?
It was so popular, we had to continue the series. And we even had, guest exec chefs on occasion, or it really is all about the building the culture, maintaining that culture, and ensuring the sanity checks for our employees.
Really nice. That's great. Okay, Wade, let's talk about some more about that remote hybrid work. How has that changed the way your employees have communicated and collaborated?
Well, sir, first off, I think I might want to go work with Michael because chef, I mean, now that's pretty cool. We don't have that in Los Adams.
Yeah.
Well, you know, we've been on this flexible work environment track, as I've indicated, for a while now. So not a ton has changed. I mean, we've already invested heavily in the technology to facilitate communications in our hybrid model. But I think the challenge with COVID has been that there isn't the same degree of spontaneity in communication. I mean, you have to be a bit more deliberate and thoughtful, I think, about interacting with others, and especially for us when it comes to training and development. Now a lot of T&D is planned, so we can still be, you know, really effective virtually. But our younger practitioners, and this speaks a little bit to what I think Michael addressed a bit ago, they learn a great deal by working closely and sitting right next to, literally, the senior professionals, because they listen to them, they observe them, talking to clients, handling difficult situations, all of that kind of stuff, which is really, that's a really critical component of knowledge transfer at a CPA firm. And I think it's the thing that's probably suffered most during COVID. So until we get back to normal, which for us is 2 to 3 days a week in the office, everyone has to really work on being more intentional about spending time with colleagues. And just another quick point, if I can make it, I think another challenge during the pandemic has been that you can certainly maintain relationships with Zoom, but it's not as easy to build them, especially with new people. And as it was either Leon or Michael or both of you said, you know, we've hired a lot of people during COVID. And so the same's true about a culture on a larger scale. If you can't interact with people in your organization face to face with at least some regularity, I mean, even if they're not the ones you work directly with on a day-to-day basis on projects and things, but if you can't, you start to lose that sticky factor. And that's what helps the newer people develop an attachment to the company. And that can really lead to some retention problems.
Yeah.
So I think the theme here for us is that we try to it's more intentionality. It's being intentional about communication opportunities.
Yeah, real nice. It kind of leads to this next one, and I know you have folks that work from home, obviously, Wade, and technology that they use, and everyone uses technology at home. But we mentioned digital equity at the top of the session here. Michael, Palo Alto Networks, how are they talking about digital equity? And have you developed a strategy for that and the technologies behind it? And maybe the first question is, what is digital equity?
Yeah, and work in progress, but digital equity, as we know it, you know, as you Google it, it comes from, you know, usually from an inclusion and diversity perspective. But when you peel the onion in an enterprise environment, it really is, how do we prevent treating remote workers as second-class citizens, where we that decide to work in the office have that face-to-face that Wade just mentioned, and being able to build that human side of the equation in a much easier fashion, what we psychologically are used to. And when your colleagues are on a screen remotely, not in field of view, with all of you sitting in a typical 6 to 8 to 12 person conference room that every enterprise has cookie cuttered for the last 20, 30 years, they literally become second-class citizens. And especially if they're not turning on their video or relying on the technology to show their video only when they're talking.
Yeah.
And the way we're approaching digital equity in this sense is, how do we make it so that we don't lose that connectivity from a visual, from an audio, from a spatial standpoint, and how do we reinvent this conference room? And literally think outside the box. It may not be within the confines of walls. When we're talking about building a collaborative space in the open, say a village of some sort, and having technology incorporated so that you can maintain that eye contact, not only with your peers that are sitting down, but also the folks that are remote. And also allow for them to take center stage as if they're within the room. And sky's the limit in terms of the tech. If you look at the folks like Facebook, they released a virtual reality workspace. Now they're incorporating technologies that revolve around VR with the software and hardware that they provide. And the intent being, if you can't be physically there, can you actually make it so that everyone feels like they're in there virtually? Not for everyone, but again, this is to the extremes now. And if you take it down a few notches, how do we reinvent this conference room?
What does that look like? I was going to ask, what does that look like? Okay, I need to redo my conference room, bring the team in, right? Who's the team? Who's providing the insight and that point of view?
Well, and the way we're tackling it is exactly that. I mean, we've partnered with One Workplace and other OEMs to look at how we can enable exactly this situation.
Mm-hmm.
There are concepts of centralizing it, for lack of a better term, a campfire approach where we huddle as employees, but we also have centered to us our remote employees, and there's that face-to-face value, not only for within the room, but to the remotes.
Yeah.
Then there's the opposite, which is how do we make it so that all of our remote constituents are as if they are with us facing center to whoever's doing the presenting. There's a lot of ways to really skin it. In terms of the back-end technologies, all of the collaborative platforms are looking at some way to do this. Microsoft, Cisco, the Zooms, the Googles, and the like, they're all at a good spot to literally lead, based on the type of technologies. And again, Facebook is an example of that. They have a competitive product and they're taking the VR angle.
Sure.
So a lot of things to come out, I would say within the next 6 months to a year, that will surprise all of us.
Wade, with that in mind, on digital equity, what is the strategy to create that, and technologies and tools, and for folks working from home? I know you guys have a practice as well.
Right. And I'm not a technology guy, really. I mean, I work closely with our group because technology has been a big part of our strategy. But I'd never heard of digital equity until this came up. So now I took it probably a little more literally, I think, than maybe Michael. But so everybody at Moss Adams has the same technology when it comes to things like applications, because we're an accounting firm and consulting. So our practitioners share work and pass things back and forth all the time. They couldn't function if they didn't have parity in those areas. But in the other areas, we're driving toward more digital equity in physical spaces too. So we're not 100% there, as I mentioned. We're only about halfway through the portfolio, but it's on the roadmap. So our renovated offices, and again, this is just a little more basic than making a person feel part of a meeting when they're remote, but every workstation has the same desktop technology package. So in a hoteling environment, when you go, it doesn't matter what desk you're at, it operates the same. And then, as I mentioned before, we're bringing even our unrenovated offices online with that as we speak. Because of COVID, we sped that up. Every collaboration room in our renovated office has the same AV technology, including video conferencing. And I know we worked really hard, our IT guys really hard to develop that model, that package. And even though we've introduced some of that in the unrenovated offices, just not on the same scale. And I think lastly, and this is probably really helping for us, is when we could see the pandemic was going to last a while. I mean, when we first hit this, it was like, oh, next month we'll be back, or the month after that. When we could see it, we realized there was a lot of inequity among people working from home with what they had to work with. So, they had their laptops, but so we invested in equipping every home with the same desktop technology as at the office. So it was an expensive proposition, but it really paid off, because now when you go from the office or from home to the office, it's seamless for you. It doesn't matter where you're going to sit on a given day, it's seamless. So that's how we've tried to kind of bring digital or introduce digital equity into the equation for us.
Nice.
I'd like to add on Wade's points too, because you mentioned focus on the remotes and how do we get them to some equity. But one thing to keep in mind, I'm on the tech side, but I for a fact know that tech doesn't work alone, and I hover around the furniture and the environment, right? And I think key to this is, regardless if I'm on a laptop sitting outdoors in our courtyard or where I am currently in a huddle room, the furniture is playing a major role in allowing me to successfully do this. And the way I do it, whether it's with the Zoom room in this huddle room, or in this case, my laptop that's sitting on the table, I have that flexibility and I can maintain the image to allow for me to have digital equity to any level. Whether I go to my studio where I typically send my execs to give them that real look and feel so everyone feels intimate with the communications, or it's quick with a laptop, or make it more inviting with a background that allows for everyone to see who I am as far as my personal. These are things that come into play, and furniture and surroundings are key to that. The technology works in conjunction with that.
Oh yes, Steelcase ran thousands of interviews with customers during the pandemic, and a big piece coming out of that was the background matters, right? We need to trust where you are. We need to know where you are. If you're not even having a blurred background like I am, maybe you don't trust where I am, right? Gosh, where is he? Is there kids? Who's in the room?
That's right. I look at Leon, and he has invited us to his background. It was kind of him to show a little bit about himself. And here I am thinking, I wonder what those flags are for. I bet he had relatives that were maybe prior service, or wow, look at those awards back there. These are things that we, from a human aspect, appreciate. At least I do.
Yeah.
It's probably been one of the few benefits of COVID and working remotely is we've looked into everybody's home. People ask me about this boat behind me, and there's a story with that too. Yeah, it's like it has been interesting that we can see the people into their homes where they work, and it's been kind of, like I said, it's kind of one of the positives that came out of the whole thing.
Yeah. Okay, guys. So this isn't an easy question. We'll try and keep it concise. I'm a small to medium business. You guys, sounds like you've all been down this path already. You've learned, and you're evolving and you're pivoting. But what would you say to me, Mr. Small Medium Business? What is the number one thing you'd recommend that a company like I should incorporate into that return to work strategy? And I'll start with Leon.
I think the most important thing is to think about how software can help you really be able to pivot and adjust. I think being agile is going to be the most important thing that we've seen, because a lot of organizations are adjusting and pivoting based on what's happening with COVID, and also based on where you might have different office locations that are out there. If the analytics piece that we talked about earlier in the webinar is really important to you as well, think about those aspects also, because there is a lot of savings in real estate you can make depending on the size of your organization. But most organizations are going to be able to consolidate and be able to modernize what they're doing within their organization. So for me, those are kind of some of the biggest things that I would focus on as an organization, no matter the size you're at. If you're a small organization with one building, or you're a very large organization with 120 different campuses globally. So
the same question to you, Wade. What would be the number one thing you recommend to us?
Well, I wholeheartedly agree with what Leon just said too. But for me, I think in a word, it's flexibility. I think no matter what your current physical environment looks like, people are used to working from home now, and then some love it as a full-time thing, some hate it as a full-time thing. I think most people, at least according to our employee surveys, which we do pretty regularly, they like it as an option. They really love the variety and the flexibility. So I think my advice to a small business owner is whatever it takes to tweak the physical environment within reason economically. People can't necessarily do what we've done, but there are things you can do. Whatever investment it takes in technology, as Leon said, and whatever efforts it takes to incorporate change management. Change management isn't that expensive, but can really help. And then whatever planning it takes to figure out how you can sort of accommodate a workforce that's remote some of the time. Make those investments. I think figure out how to embrace flexibility into your organization.
Michael, same question.
I wholeheartedly agree, concur with what Leon and Wade had touched on, but I can ramble on technology all day. But for an SMB owner, I would say get past the insecurities first and foremost, embrace the hybrid environment, which is here to stay, and put in the trust and empathy for your workforce, who will be able to be productive regardless where they're going to be. And if you follow the steps of what Wade and Leon had pointed out, both on the tech and real estate side, and being able to make it all gel, in terms of leadership, that is probably the hardest hurdle, is acceptance of the fact that you have to have that trust and provide that empathy and the social mental well-being for your employees as they traverse this hybrid environment that we're going to be in.
It's a very human answer to a technology question, right? I mean, to hear empathy and flexibility and agility and pivoting the business, right? This is behaviors. This is not a technology solution, and really comes back to there was no playbook for this, right? I mean, it all just really brings it back together, and an incredible conversation. I moved us along because I wanted to get to a couple of questions that have come in, and so we're going to hit some questions here with the remaining minutes we have. And Michael, this one is for you. So, what are the security issues with individuals working on multiple types of Wi-Fi versus working from the office?
Oh, this is a great question. Right up my alley, but I do confess I'm not the security expert on my side of the equation. But if I were to give the pitch of what Palo Alto Networks would tell you, we would promote what we call the zero trust environment. That means that's applicable to your remote workforce. So whether you're at Starbucks or you're at home with your Wi-Fi, the security portfolio that we would maintain applies to both your laptop, the backend, into our gateways from a VPN standpoint, and our firewalls, and our threat analysis within that, the entire ecosystem of which is applicable. But you're absolutely right. The moment you move outside of our office, or for any enterprise for that matter, it varies on how companies define zero trust enforcement and policies. But that is the going mantra in the cybersecurity world, which is, how do you protect your remote workforce? And we have quite a number of things that are literally, I can't talk about right now,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
it's safe to say that we are at the forefront of exactly that topic.
Interesting. Well, and we didn't even touch on, for the folks for all of us that are working at home and have worked at home for the last year and a half plus, how's our bandwidth at home, right? We didn't even touch on bandwidth, and all the kids are in school. The high school kids are online. Every age group's online now, right? And it's not just, oh, it's gaming time, my bandwidth is low. No, it's between 7 and 4, and the kids are in class, and I have meetings, and the bandwidth goes, right? It's just crazy.
Mark, 20 years ago, or maybe a little less than 20 years ago, there was another pandemic called SARS, and the industry was not mature enough to support that. But video conferencing and collaboration was leading the charge with at least allowing our executives, which was typically the customers or consumers of that technology at that time. Now it's quite democratized. Everyone has the ability, but it took, our telecom industry, the carriers, to really catch up to that. It took the Zooms, the Microsofts, the Googles to catch up to that. And it took us as, the workforce to embrace the tech. And it took a pandemic to finally prove the concept 100% that it is doable.
Yeah, great point. Great point. I remember it. It's yeah. Here's one, Leon, probably aimed at you, sir, and may have touched on already, but how are you collecting the office dynamics and data that you refer to multiple times that we've referred to in this presentation?
Yeah, so it's done through multiple sources, either being Wi-Fi, the mobile app with Bluetooth beacon connection so that it can identify the location, as well as sensors or IoT platforms inside of the space itself. All of the gathering of the data is done anonymously, so it doesn't have any idea who the individual person is, so that it does give you a lot more of those analytics from that anonymous standpoint, which is very critical. You know, we are a GDPR compliant platform, so we treat data privacy very carefully and very critically with our customers. We have a lot of customers in Europe, as you can imagine, with GDPR standards, but we follow those practices everywhere we have our application globally. So those are important. So, and another question I'll answer that's kind of along this line, I was just looking in there around how do we look at predictive analytics for touchdown spaces? And really it's looking at, from that sensor information, touchdown spaces are commonly non-bookable spaces. So you'll look at occupancy with a sensor. Touchdown areas, if you have like a couch and some softer chairs, to be more or less a touchdown, or maybe you have a little conference table on, you know, more stools. Those are good touchdown areas, and they're usually non-bookable spaces where you're going to look at, is it occupied or not? So occupancy, you can build with the data from occupancy, you can really understand what are the common times of day and which days of the week are those being utilized more often than not. And that's what's going to give you those predictive analytics. So you're going to be able to book, if they're not commonly used in Friday afternoons or every day of the week after 3 o'clock, well, that's a good area and a good time to actually go down there and touch down and have a meeting. So
yeah, great points. And I think one thing we also learned over the last year and a half plus, excuse me, is keeping our meetings on time, perhaps giving a few minutes early so folks can get up and go to the next meeting and all of that. We're going to end this one on time. Gentlemen, I want to thank you so much. What a session. Really interesting to hear about the human side of this as well, as we just touched on. It's incredible that we can have some humane discussions and theory behind some high-tech problems as well, and words like empathy and patience and flexible. It's a great dialogue, and keeping in mind that it really is about the employee experience. And we have a few questions still to get back to, so we will send those responses with the recording in the next day or two. So please look out for those, because there was some questions about employee experience, which is what this is all about. So I am so thankful for your time, and for all of you listening as well. We thank you for carving out an hour of your day to join us. We will report back with answers and send you the link to the recording. And in the meanwhile, please stay healthy, stay safe, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.